Okay, wonderful. Our next guest is LJ Aaen. LJ has been a Buddhist meditation teacher for over 15 years. She began her journey in the Kadampa Buddhist tradition to find peace and meaning in her busy life as a mother and engineer. She quickly entered the special teacher training program and completed the study of all the main Mahayana Buddhist texts. She has taught at the Kadampa meditation centers in Phoenix and London and is now teaching in Denver, Colorado. LJ has found meaning in her Buddhist practice and study and loves sharing the teachings with all who will listen. Welcome, LJ. Thank you so much for joining us in this interfaith celebration. Having been to the Kadampa meditation centers in Baltimore and DC and finding profound beauty in the Buddhist teachings, I'm grateful that you are sharing some of this wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very, very happy to share some of the Buddhist teachings, and also thank you for your interest and your open hearts in listening. So I'm a Kadampa meditation teacher, which means that I study and practice Kadampa Buddhism, which is part of the new Kadampa tradition. And Kadampa means somebody who takes all Buddha's teachings as personal advice and puts them into practice in daily life. And so when I heard about the title of this conference being Peace and Wisdom in Action, I thought this is exactly what Kadampas do. We put all of our teachings, all of our practice into action, and try to better ourselves and help everyone else at the same time. And so this tradition, the Kadampa tradition, is an unbroken lineage of Buddhist teachings from master to master from the time of Buddha. And everything that I will say in this very short talk comes from this tradition and comes from these Buddhist masters. Some of the names are Atisha, who's the founder of Kadampa tradition, Old Kadampa tradition, Jason Kappa, who's the founder of the New Kadampa tradition, and other lineage gurus like Jijin Rinpoche and Geshe Kelsang Gyatso Rinpoche, who is my root guru, my teacher. And so what I was hoping to present today is Buddhist teachings on our Buddha nature, and a brief introduction as to how we realize this Buddha nature. So Buddha's first teaching, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, was the Four Noble Truths, in which Buddha explained essentially four things. He said you should know suffering, you should abandon origin, you should attain cessation, and you should practice the path. And the very essence of this is that we need to understand that each and every living being suffers in the same ways, and that we suffer from life to life to life to life to life. And that the origin of all of that suffering, this infinite suffering over incalculably long periods of time, is our delusions, our states of mind like anger, uncontrolled desire, grasping, self-grasping, ignorance, these states of mind that are disturbing, painful, and very importantly, are distorted states of mind, the minds that disconnect us from reality. I think we clearly know that when we become angry, we become disconnected from everything that's going on. So very briefly, the delusions like anger, uncontrolled desire, jealousy, miserliness, greed, these are delusions that disturb our mind and cause us to behave in uncontrolled and harmful manner. And so that these delusions are our enemies, that we don't have any enemies who have arms and legs. No living being is our enemy, but our own delusions are enemies. And that through practicing a spiritual path, we can completely cease all of our suffering. So in a very, very brief way, these are the Four Noble Truths. And so what I wanted to discuss with you is that sort of these Four Noble Truths, they stand on the ground of this understanding that each and every living being inside them has Buddha nature, this indestructible, infinite potential to completely cease their own suffering and to attain a state of enlightenment, attain a state in which we can help each and every living being every day. And so that our very nature is this purity, this potential for infinite unconditional love, infinite omniscient wisdom, that this abides at the heart of each and every living being. And so this is not abstract, actually. It's not an abstract idea, and we can very practically in our daily life connect with this. And then when we connect with our Buddha nature, then we find it very easy then to connect to everybody else's Buddha nature. And then our relationships massively transform. So I said Buddha nature is not abstract. So for example, anybody who's done or tried even a little bit of meditation, what they've noticed is that maybe just breathing meditation is quite common nowadays. People do some meditation in various spiritual practices. When our mind quiets down even just a little bit, when this incessant flow of distracting thoughts subsides, this very deep and natural peace and contentment naturally arise from within. So if we subside even temporarily just through breath, nothing complicated, although there are many, many meditations, but just breath, our mind becomes a little bit more still. And so what we find is that without having done anything external, our mind has become more peaceful, and then we become more happy, more content. It is said, and many people know this now in various spiritual traditions, that just meditating 10 or 15 minutes every day sets us up for a more peaceful, a more content, more loving experience in our day. And so how does this relate to our Buddha nature? Well, this shows us that actually the nature of our mind, all levels of mind, including our very subtle mind, the deepest level that goes from life to life, the nature of our mind is actually peace. I know that in our neurotic world, we may not necessarily think of ourselves as naturally peaceful person, but because our mind is naturally peaceful, this shows us that if we have wisdom methods to keep our mind peaceful throughout the day through wisdom ways of thinking, then we will eventually be peaceful and happy all the time, and then continue, be able to help each and every living being accomplish that same state. And so analogy is given of a dirty water. So if you have a glass of dirty water, the nature of the water is actually pure. Like water is always H2O. The water is always pure, but is polluted with various impurities. And these impurities can be removed from the water. So although the impurities pollute the water itself is always pure. Even the dirty water retains in it a potential to be pure. And so in similar way, our mind is naturally pure, naturally loving, naturally compassionate, but through generating the thoughts of anger, frustration, jealousy, uncontrolled desire, the craving, these states of mind, they pollute our mind, making it unpeaceful, disturbed, and making us very, very happy. Sometimes so unhappy, sometimes extremely unhappy. And so just like pollution can be removed from water, the delusions, so the origins of our suffering, can be removed. And so what that means for each and every one of us is that anytime we experience any sense of peace, that is showing us this very pure potential that we have in our hearts, potential for permanent inner peace, potential for unconditional love for all living beings, for omniscient wisdom. And that if we engage in the spiritual path, we'll be able to remove bit by bit these impurities from our mind, because our mind functions on a habit. And so by removing the causes and the habits of anger or jealousy, for example, we can eventually remove them completely once and for all, so that they never arise again. And so when we need to see this in ourselves. We need to, through some meditation, through some contemplation, see this this pure potential, and then start to identify with the potential. And so another analogy that is helpful is that Buddha said that our Buddha nature is like a gold nugget buried in dirt. And it doesn't matter how horrible person delusions and behaviors are, which would be dirt, inside their heart, they have this indestructible gold Buddha nature. And so we can then start to see that in ourselves. And so by understanding that anger arises, the jealousy arises, we learn about these states of mind, we learn how to interfere with their development, but we never identify with them. And we start to more and more over time in our practice identify with this Buddha nature. So one way that we can practice that is, for example, when anger arises, instead of thinking, I am an angry person or I am angry, where we take anger and we take ourselves and kind of smush it together in one lump. So instead of saying, I am angry, we can say, there is anger temporarily arising in my mind. There's an enormous difference between saying, I am angry, and I have a mind, and in my mind, temporarily, there is anger arising, like dirt. And so this kind of using words of wisdom to properly describe our situation causes us then to see that we can get rid of anger without harming our mind. And I know in one way that sounds a little bit silly, but you know, sometimes when we're angry and think, oh, I'm so angry, and somebody says, let's go meditate, and then we feel like even more threatened because it feels like they're not like seeing us, they're not respecting us, when in reality somebody's trying to help us to get rid of this sort of this enemy of delusion, which is in our own mind. And so it's like when we say I'm angry and somebody says, okay, let's get peaceful, we're like, how, like which part of me do I need to cut off in order to get rid of that anger? And you feel, because with our view, we have identified with our anger. But not only that is not helpful in getting rid of anger, but it's not actually correct. It's not actually true that we are our anger. We have a mind. Yeah, you are not your mind. And our mind temporarily, due to various causes and conditions, generates anger. It's a dirt. And so just like we have no problem washing the dirt off of our clothes, we develop this idea that we want to get rid of our anger, get rid of our jealousy, get rid of our greed, get rid of our miserliness, just like getting rid of the dirt. And we're not identifying with it. We just think seeing it as something that is problematic and that needs to go. And identify with our pure nature, identify with the gold, and keep getting rid of the dirt. When we see that very clearly in ourselves, it becomes very easy for us to see everyone else in exactly the same way. So instead of focusing on people's delusions, people's negative actions, and getting distracted and causing our own negativity, our own anger by observing somebody else's bad behavior, we then focus on the gold of their Buddha nature in their heart. And of course, we don't become stupid. It's not like we suddenly don't observe that they are misbehaving, but we see that we are identifying them with their Buddha nature. And then through our actions, it is so much easier then to become patient and compassionate and loving and kind and help them with their negativity, help them with their negative actions. If we kind of mush together a person and their delusions, seeing them as a horrible person, which is, by the way, what anger does. When we are angry, we see another person as an intrinsically horrible person and therefore generate anger. And then there's like this feedback mechanism between us seeing a horrible person and getting more angry. It's not a realistic situation. It's not what's actually going on, and it's certainly not helpful. It's like that saying, nobody in the history of the universe has calmed down by being yelled at to calm down. And so when we can see others' Buddha nature, we don't get distracted by their delusions, and then we help them, always help them. It's always so much easier to become compassionate when you see people through their pure potential. And so this is not only kind of the baseline of Buddha's teachings, because Buddha taught out of compassion for us to completely cease our own suffering. That was the whole purpose, is that he found the way. He showed us the way about what their problem was, our delusions, and how to get rid of them once and for all. And so not only did this provide kind of as like a baseline for attaining enlightenment, but it's a very baseline of having a peaceful life. This wisdom is a baseline for having a peaceful life, because through identifying with our pure potential, we're able to be kind, we're able to be compassionate, we're able to be peaceful. And then we turn our eyes towards others and want to help them as well. And it turns out that the very best way and the most powerful way to attain our own peace is to wish for the happiness of others. So these are the basis for Mahayana teachings. And so Buddhist Master Shantideva, he said, all the happiness there is in the world arises from wishing others to be happy. And all the suffering there is in the world arises from wishing ourselves to be happy. And so the way that we actualize this Buddha nature, bring it to fruition, is then realizing that the happiness and freedom from suffering of all living beings is vastly more important than our own, because we are just one and others are countless. And this idea that we're the center of the universe and that it profoundly matters what happens just to us and not so much about what happens to everyone else is completely mistaken. It's not a realistic view of the world. And so with wisdom, then we turn our attention towards others. And what we find is that this wish for others to be happy is an inexhaustible fountain of happiness for ourselves. So wishing others to be happy is a happiness for ourselves. And so through this wish to make others happy, we see them as very precious and important. We care deeply about what happens to them. We care deeply about every living being and what their experience is. And so what that does is this creates a world for us in which everyone matters. Everybody becomes, from our side, our best friend. So imagine if you went into a room full of people and they were all your best friends. And so to a Mahayana Buddhist, to a practicing Buddhist who's developed their mind in this way, every living being is the most precious friend from their side. And so then how does a person feel? They feel wonderful. Their love protects them from suffering, and their love causes them to behave in the most beneficial way with everyone else. And so in this manner, we first, through understanding our own suffering and then understanding the enormous importance of every other living being, we eventually then develop the mind of bodhicitta, which propels us to attain enlightenment. And then at that state, we develop an omniscient mind with which we are able to help each and every living being every day. It is said that if all living beings, if we all cherished others more than ourselves, every single problem of this world would disappear within a few years. And so for us individually, this is actually what happens, is that our problems start to disappear, and as our mind fills with love and compassion. So Buddha's path to enlightenment is not just a path to enlightenment, but it's a path to a better day. So whether you want to attain enlightenment or you want to have a great week, the methods are exactly the same. And the methods are to understand that we have pure, infinite potential in our heart. And so there's every living being. And that the only problems we have are the problems of our delusions, like anger, uncontrolled desire, self-grasping, ignorance, jealousy, etc. And so it's a win-win. It's a win-win whether you want to attain enlightenment or not. And it's always a win-win. Helping others always helps yourself. It's a very brief introduction to all of 84,000 teachings that Buddha had. So I don't know if there's questions that you would like me to answer, but I'm very happy to stop here or answer some questions.
Thank you, LJ. Yeah, there are some questions that came in the question box. Do you have access to those, or would you like me to?
I do.
Okay.
Actually, I just had a look at them. Okay, so does our delusions are an enemy? Profound, yes, definitely. And the fun part is determining what are delusions and what are not. Much easier said than done. Actually, that's very correct. There are some delusions that are very easy for us to recognize. For example, anger is relatively easy. Jealousy is. But uncontrolled desire is very, very challenging, because uncontrolled desire and love for us but look similar. Well, in reality, they're vastly different states of mind. So thank you for that point. Delusions can be quite challenging for us to recognize. Let me see. Oh, yeah, there's two different things. What is the most profound thing you have learned or experienced practicing Buddhism? Well, this Buddha nature actually was the most important thing that I have found in Buddhism. The difference between love and uncontrolled desire was profoundly important. But by far is the ultimate nature of reality, emptiness, is the most profound and the most wisdom filled. It's a wisdom. It's an incredible wisdom that tells us the true nature of reality, that all is created by mind. And the teachings are very clear. It can be understood. And that's, I have to say, by far, that was the most profound thing. I'm loving what you're sharing about the way to see living beings. This may be off topic, but that painting behind you, what is a Buddhist image? This is called, it's an image of all the Buddhas. It's called the Field of Merit. All the Buddhas in one beautiful image. When you encounter someone, is this okay? Should I stop? Oh no, I think I have 2 more minutes. When we encounter someone who embraces their delusions instead of happiness, is there something you can do other than setting an example to help them recognize and overcome their delusions? That's a wonderful, wonderful question. And as a parent of a teenager, I can tell you by far an example, being a good example is the best. Honestly, it is by far the best way that we teach people, because if you are in a situation when, let's say, somebody's really, really angry with us, and we respond with absolute patient acceptance and compassion, there's nothing more powerful than experiencing this with someone. And so even though we may be, it seems like faster for us to just teach them and, hey, this is your delusion. But unless we are ready to hear that, and this is where our compassion comes in, when we're with others, if we listen with compassion, with an open mind, we're going to sense if there is an opening. If there's an opening towards a discussion like this, then yes, by all means go. But with our empathy, compassion, we can tell when there isn't. And then there's absolutely nothing wrong with just being an example. I think this is all I see.
There was one more. Somebody put a question in the chat instead of in the Q&A box. It says, what particular practices do you recommend for ridding ourselves of these delusions?
So each and every bit of Buddha's teaching, 84,000 teachings, have that only one single purpose, is for us to get rid of our delusions. And so anything. But one thing that I will point out is that Buddhists rely on three jewels: Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Sangha is a spiritual community. This is essential. So finding a spiritual community that you can go to, receive teachings, ask questions, and get support is the way to go. Yeah, we really need a community that can guide us and support us in the right way. So instead of talking to a friend who'll say, yeah, you should get angry, somebody will say, yeah, you got angry. What is it? What do you think we can do? So I would say finding a community.
Looks like one more came in, LJ.
Okay. Let me see here. When one is stuck in a state of delusion, how is it that overcome? That is a brilliant question. So one thing to understand is that a state of delusion, for example, anger, it's almost like a self-perpetuating state in which we are out of control. So what needs to happen when we're in a state of delusion is that we need to essentially, just for a few moments, shut the mind down for a reset, a little bit like shutting down a computer. So a breathing meditation, or there's meditations like, one of them is called absorption of cessation, when we become imagine that our mind cannot perceive things. We need some method of meditation to take our mind away from that spinning inside the delusion into a reset state. Because if you've ever tried to argue yourself out of anger, you would have failed. Right? Because its state of delusion is out of control and it's self-perpetuating. So it's like almost there needs to be like a shut off for a few minutes, few moments, reset. Our mind becomes a little bit calmer. And then within a calmer space, we then remember some wisdom that we have heard before that we can now start to practice. So meditation is an essential tool, both for cutting the flow of delusion and for generating wisdom. Because through meditating, we're developing familiarity with the right way, wisdom way of thinking. Because when we're relating to the world from the point of view of wisdom, our mind is at peace. We are happy and we're acting in the best way possible. Do you want me to answer this one more question, or do we need to move on?
Go ahead and get the last one.
Okay. How would you distinguish a delusion from a distraction? Most of our distractions are coming from a delusion. So, for example, if you're trying to meditate on the breath and you're thinking about what you're going to do after, because that sounds more interesting, that means that you are following a delusion of uncontrolled desire that's saying, I need something outside of myself to be happy, and my inner peace is not happening. Yeah, so most of our distractions are actually coming from delusion. Meditation is so important, helps us to become more mindful and can alter the course of one's life away from what is keeping them stuck with their dirt. 100%. You're preaching to the choir. Yeah.
Well, Jay, thank you so much. That was really, really wonderful.